So over the years, I've had a love-hate relationship with the Nook. I absolutely love Barnes & Noble. I go there all the time with my wife. We love checking out the books there and just spending time in a bookstore. It's really, really cozy and wonderful. But I absolutely do not like their Nook, especially when you compare it against the Kindle. But recently, this past summer, they just came out with the Nook Glow Light 4 Plus. Now, I've got to say that this new Nook is definitely the most premium Nook that you can buy right now. They've made quite a few upgrades compared to their previous models, but there are still a few quirks that exist that absolutely infuriate me. In this video, I'll be breaking down my review into several different parts. You can skip around using the chapter markers down below, but at the end of the video, I'll also be sharing my overall bookworm rating. Let's dive into it. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the overall buying experience of the new Nook. The Glow Light 4 Plus will cost you $199 US. Now, the cool thing about that is if you have a Barnes & Noble membership, you'll actually get 10% off of that, as well as some stamps to your account, which is really nice. So I got 20 bucks off just for having a membership. And this is probably the most comparable to the Kindle Paperwhite Signature Edition or the Kobo Libra 2. Now, unlike the Paperwhite or the Kobo, the Glow Light only comes in one SKU, one option. There are no customizations. You can only get it in a 32GB configuration in one color, which is black. Now, one thing I love about the Nook is you can actually go to a Barnes & Noble store and just buy the Nook directly from the retail store. So I just went to my local Barnes & Noble and picked one up. It was really, really easy, or I could have purchased it online and gotten it shipped to me within a few days probably. So that's one advantage of buying from Barnes & Noble. Moving right along, let's talk about the premiumness of the new Nook, and I want to talk about the materials and build quality that they're using here. I've got to say, it's a huge upgrade from the previous Nook Glow Light Plus. This is very similar to a Kindle in terms of the materials used. It's an all plastic design, and the back of the Nook is very similar to the Kindle Paperwhite, where it's kind of rubberized material, a plasticky material, but it feels a bit more premium than before. Now, one thing to consider is Barnes & Noble is not doing any kind of marketing for environmental friendliness. And the reason why I'm saying this is because Kindle and Kobo are both making a huge push to advertise how all their devices are being made with recycled materials, and that's actually a really big deal in today's world. People who buy e-readers tend to care about being a bit more eco-friendly. You're saving a lot of books from being printed, you're using an e-device instead, and Barnes & Noble is not making any mention of that at all. So I really do hope in the future we see some more recycled materials being used for the Nook. Now, something new to the Nook is this new premium display. It's actually a completely flush display, which is new compared to all the other Nooks that I've tried. So I really do think they're making an effort to make this Nook way more comparable to all the other e-readers out there right now. It just feels a lot nicer to hold. The bezel is also very comfortable. It's actually a great size. I can easily rest my thumb on it and hold it with one hand without my fingers touching the screen. It's very, very convenient, and I actually think it's the perfect size for a bezel. Now, unlike the back of the device, which is more of a rubberized plastic, the front display is a gloss finish, which is really nice. That's the first thing I noticed when I took this device out of the box. It is just a night and day difference from the old Nook Glow Light, which was more of a soft touch plastic. This device is still very soft and comfortable to hold, but it just looks a lot nicer. Now, one downside to all these new premium materials is the fact that this Nook is a fingerprint magnet. I do love the new premium design of the Nook, but I am getting fingerprints all over the device, especially on the back and on the bezels. There are just fingerprints everywhere, and I really have to do my best to clean them off with the microfiber cloth. So if you care about that, you might want to consider getting a case to cover up the back and have some other kind of material so you don't see as many fingerprints. Now, putting those fingerprints aside, I do want to talk about the buttons on this device. The Nook has quite a few buttons compared to the average e-reader, and I really do appreciate how they include page turn buttons on both the left and right side of the Nook. The page turn buttons do work very well. I like the way that they're situated. They're not in the way. The bezel is still available to hold on to. You can easily move your thumb over to the page turn buttons to press. They're not the most premium buttons, I would say. I think the most premium buttons I've ever used on an e-reader is the Kindle Oasis. I love those page turn buttons, but these buttons work very well, and they're very reliable too from my experience so far, unlike the Kobo, which I've had a lot of issues with. Another button that is worth talking about is the power button on this new Nook. They put the power button on the right side of the device near the top, and this is a big deal because oftentimes for some reason we're seeing a lot of companies put their power button on on the bottom of their e-reader, which in my mind makes no sense. I always accidentally press the power button on my Kindle. So having the power button on the top right is definitely a nice to have. Now, if you couldn't tell, there's actually one more button on this Nook, and that is the Nook logo on the front of the display. On the previous Nook models, this would actually be a physical button that you can press, but on this new Nook Glowlight 4, it's turned into this capacitive button that you just press on and hold on for it to activate. It kind of acts like a home button. You just press and hold on it, and you can unlock your device. If you're reading a book, you can press and hold on it to go back to your home screen. So it's nice to have a home button on an e-reader. We don't really see those very often now, especially on the Kindle lineup or the Kobo lineup. There are no home buttons at all. But I don't like this home button very much because it's not a physical button and it doesn't always respond when I press it. It definitely took me a few experiments to realize that the button only works if you press and hold on it. If you just tap on it once, nothing really happens. But when you do press and hold on it, there's always this lag and delay before it actually responds. So I'm not sure if that's a software issue or a button issue, but either way, it's nice to have there. It's very convenient to always have a button to go back home. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about now is the crispiness of this new Nook. The display on this is actually very nice. It is a 7.8-inch display, which is exactly 1 inch larger than my Kindle Paperwhite and almost a full inch larger than the Kobo Libra. If you ask me, this is actually a very nice screen size to have. I would love to see more Kindles, for example, come out at this screen size. It is larger than we're used to seeing, but not too large where it's not good for reading a book. For example, I really don't like the screen size of the Kindle Scribe. That thing is just too big for reading. If they made something around this screen size, 7.8 inches or 8 inches, I think that is the ideal size for reading at a more premium level. Now, in terms of screen resolution, this device does have 300 ppi, which stands for pixels per inch. That is the industry standard at this point. No complaints there. The display on this Nook also has what they're calling glow light technology, which basically stands for the lighting that comes up so you can read at night. They also have night mode, which is their terminology for warm light, so you can activate the adjustable warm light and make your screen a bit less blue, which really helps for reading at night before going to bed. Now, one thing that this Nook is missing is an ambient light sensor. My Kindle Paperwhite Signature Edition does have that, so it'll automatically adjust the brightness for me depending on the lighting conditions of the room. On the Nook, you'll have to be responsible for adjusting your own brightness, but this really is not that big of a deal, so I wouldn't worry about that either. Next up, let's talk about connectivity on this Nook. It does have a USB-C port, which is a very nice thing to see at this point in 2023. It also has a little LED light next to the port to let you know when it's charging and when it's not. And one surprising thing that is a bit unique to this Nook is it has a 3.5mm jack for headphones. Now, it does also have Bluetooth, so you can go to the settings and turn Bluetooth on and pair a Bluetooth speaker or some AirPods, but you can also just plug in some headphones. If you're using some old school headphones, which is something that a lot of people still do, you can plug them in and listen to audiobooks directly on your Nook with those headphones, which a lot of other e-readers can't do in today's world. Now, if you ask me, I really think a better feature would have been having a speaker instead of the headphone jack, but I know for a lot of people having the headphone jack is really important, but I bet you there are more people out there that would benefit from having a built-in speaker who just forget their headphones one day and need something on the fly to listen to an audiobook. Now, in terms of battery life, they are advertising 3 hours of battery life under the most ideal conditions, which I don't think most people will be getting. So expect probably a week or two of battery if you're using it on a regular basis. Or if you're using audiobooks a lot, they're advertising 9 hours of continuous playback. So again, it really depends how you use your Nook. Depending on that, you'll get a certain amount of battery life. If I hear about any issues or experience anything about the battery, I'll be sure to leave a comment updated down below. All right, next up, I want to talk about the things that absolutely infuriate me about this Nook, and those are all the software related things. The software will make or break your device, and unfortunately on the Nook, the software just is not quite there yet. Now, before jumping into that, I do need to say one thing. At the end of the day, all these details are fun to talk about, but what really matters is actually using your e-reader to read books. If you don't have a healthy reading habit, it doesn't matter which device you're using. What matters first is getting to a point where you can read every day. That is the first step before anything else. Now, something that really helped me read more books was having some accountability. Now, especially if you like to read nonfiction books, I want to invite you to join me in reading a book every single month in my book club. The book club is called Presently Reading, and the way it works is I pick a new book every single month and we read it alongside 1,000 other bookworms from around the world who have signed up. It's a great way to hold yourself accountable. I'll send you an email every Saturday checking in to make sure you're on track, as well as my personal notes on the book that we're reading. It's a really fun way to stay accountable. If that sounds interesting to you, I'll leave a link down below in the description. I cannot wait to talk to you about the next book. All right, let's talk about the software on this Nook. The first thing that really bothers me is the amount of clutter and recommendations they have on the Nook. The first thing you see on the home screen is a little bit on the top with the books that you actually own, but on the bottom half of the screen, they just instantly have recommendations going. It's very similar to the Kindle where they have a whole tab of recommendations. They do the same thing over here, and I really wish there was just a way to turn off all these recommendations. I just want to see the books that I've purchased and not a bunch of ads. One other thing that bothers me about the Nook is the navigation of the device. They have menus everywhere, and it's kind of difficult to find what you're looking for. The tabs at the bottom are actually pretty nicely labeled and laid out. I do appreciate that, but something that's really confusing to me is when you press the Nook button, the home button on the device, you expect that it would take you to the first tab in this list, but it doesn't. It brings you to this entirely different home screen that could only be accessed by the button, which is really confusing because that should be the first tab on the tabs at the bottom. Another area of the navigation that really bothers me is the readouts tab at the bottom. They've had this here for a long time now. It's basically more recommendations and more advertisements to sell you more books. I don't want more ads, and I really don't like how they have an entire tab dedicated to that over here. Now, another software feature that's really troublesome on the Nook are the note-taking features that they have. Now, you can open a book and highlight things and add a note if you want to. The features do exist, but they are very frustrating to use. Just try highlighting some text. It just takes forever to get your finger to highlight a sentence and get it exactly right where you want it. Then when you type a note on top of the infuriating highlighting process, you have to deal with the laggy keyboard. It's just so much more laggy than I'm used to on my Kindle, for example. I'm typing a letter on the keyboard and it shows up a second or two later. It is just not a fun experience. And honestly, I think overall the biggest complaint I have about the software is that it's just so slow and laggy. It's just not optimized. The user interface is a bit cluttered. It's just very laggy to open up a certain menu. Even opening up a book to read has a few seconds of a delay and has to go through a loading screen every single time. There are just so many small little things that really bother me that I don't have to deal with on Kobo or Kindle. Now, on top of all the slowness, they really lock you in to the Barnes & Noble ecosystem. They don't have any support that I can see for third-party apps like Readwise, for example. They do have support for Overdrive and getting library books by plugging into your computer, but one thing that I really struggled with is plugging in my Nook to my Mac. Apparently, you have to download a second app on your Mac called Android File Transfer to get the Nook to properly appear so you can drag and drop files onto it, but I took a long time to figure this out, and I was plugging in several different USB-C cables to see why my Nook was not being detected by my Mac. It was driving me insane, but I eventually figured it out, and that does work, but I really wish they had more third-party support directly on the Nook. So to wrap things up over here, as a bookworm, my rating of this device is probably 3 stars. I think the hardware is really nice, a very nice welcome upgrade from the previous Nooks. They got all that right on target, I would say, but where it really falls short is the software experience. I really think if they just spent a good amount of time optimizing it, cleaning it up, making it the best it could be, the software side of things, that by itself would make this Nook so much more valuable and something I could recommend. But as of right now, I really can't recommend it unless you're already in the Barnes & Noble ecosystem. Now, if you want to see what I think is the best e-reader right now for most people, the Kindle Paperwhite, I have a whole in-depth review on my channel about that. Link for that on the screen right now. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.